minutes already. Okay. All right. Thank you, everybody, for coming. I'm not sure if everyone is from the club, so I will just say that my name is Ray. I'm the president of the World Campus Tech Club, and we have Tracy Maleeff. Did I say that right?
You did. Thank you.
And she's going to talk about strategies for starting a career in InfoSec. So I will let you take it away.
Hi, everyone. I'm Tracy Maleeff. I graduated from Penn State in 1999, and if any of you weren't born yet, I don't want to hear it. But I was actually a liberal arts major, so that's also something I wanted to mention, that you can have a thriving career in tech and even specifically in security with a liberal arts background. Just so a little bit about me, so I have actually an associate's degree from Penn State. I have a bachelor's degree in history from Temple University, and then I have a master's of library and information science degree from the University of Pittsburgh. Boo, I know. So we're a divided household here where I live. I'm outside the Philadelphia area, and my career turn into information security happened about 4 years ago. And what I want this hour is actually, I want to hear from you the most. I know that Ray has a lot of questions, so I'm just kind of doing the setup here. So that's my educational background. I just decided to make a career change into information security because I felt like I'd done everything that I could do in library world, and I felt that tech was really something that I'd always had an interest in. So I was just very proactive, networking with people, going to workshops, going to meetings, going to meetups, things like that. And fast forward to how and why networking is so important, and this is networking with people, is that I recently was laid off from my current job, which, happens. That happens in every industry. But because I've dedicated so much time and energy and just passion to networking, the tweet that I posted notifying people that I was laid off and asking if there were any job leads, the last time I checked, it had over 1,500 retweets. And I don't even know how many likes or replies, but my Twitter blew up, my LinkedIn blew up, my email blew up, and I'm only mentioning that just because I want to emphasize to everyone that networking with people, it's not only just personally and professionally gratifying, but it's going to help you with your job search. So I am in the position now that I am looking for jobs, but I have made all these connections over the years that I have people, sending me information, and I'm very grateful for it. I'm getting bogged down trying to thank everyone individually because I'm trying to personally thank everyone and keep in touch with everyone doing this. So I just want to emphasize that you need to invest in the people factor. And we can talk about that more later if anyone has any other questions about actually going about that. But I just want to mention that. So I think that's enough about me. Oh, I guess I should explain what I do in information security. I spent the past 2 years in what's called a SOC, Security Operations Center, for a global company. And I did a variety of things. I spent a lot of time with the phishing emails, dissecting an email to see where it's really coming from, what the links really are. Sometimes there's some nasty links embedded in a Word document or a PDF. I know how to go in and pull those out, how to block them on the firewall, and even just how to talk to the end user, because you'll learn that having soft skills and end user interaction skills is going to be very key to security, because as much as people like to complain about the end users, they're also your first line of defense, and they can report back and tell you what they're seeing out there. I did a lot of that. I also did some threat intelligence. I can't really get into it too much, but just using my librarian skills, I spent 15 years as a librarian, mostly in law firms. I have a lot of research skills. So I use my research skills to do threat intelligence. So I kind of did a little bit of a couple different things. And that's information security. There's so many different roles. There's more technical roles, there's less technical roles. It's a big umbrella. Information security is a very big umbrella, and there's a lot of things underneath it. So I think that's enough about me. I want to hear your questions. And so Ray, I'll hand it over to you and just ask away and kind of keep me on time. I'm not sure how many questions we have, so let's do that. And also let's hear back from people as well.
Okay, so I have a list of questions that we got from the club, so I'll just run through those first, and then I guess we can ask if anybody else has questions. If we start running long, I can cut off these ones, and we can see if anybody in the
Sure.
audience has any. All right, so the first one I have is, what are things to highlight on your resume to get the interview? Like what skills, experience?
Sure. Well, definitely if you know any programming languages, any coding languages. So if you know Python, make sure that's a bullet point, towards the top. Any specific classes you've taken, if you've taken a forensics class and that's actually what you want to get into. Now, don't highlight things for the sake of highlighting them. I would maybe pull things out of your classes that, you're really interested in. Languages are a big one. Specific skills, certifications. I'm not sure if any of you are also pursuing certifications in addition to your regular studies, but a certification is something that you would definitely put high up there. Um, those sort of things. You'd want to have a part of your resume, towards the top where you really kind of bullet point your skills, like an elevator pitch of sorts that you want to highlight what your interest and your skills are. So that's, the first thing that somebody sees.
Okay. How important do you feel it is to write papers while you're going to school, like call for papers, stuff like that, blog posts?
Well, call for papers and blog posts are two different things, but I'm happy to answer them separately. Well, blog posts I feel like are important because that's a way to prove your knowledge. I know that one of the things, no matter what field you're getting into, something for students, it's always hard to try and prove your knowledge, especially if you don't really have any work experience. So if you have a blog where you're detailing, say you decide to blog your reverse engineering exploits, the things that you do or things that you know. I, for example, have an OSINT blog, OSINT being open source intelligence, research related. I have a blog on Medium. I call it OSINT Goodness, and I'm not really sure why, but that's the name I came up for it. And I will pick a resource and I will pull it apart, explain, what it does, explain to people how to use it. And I do that because I want to have some sort of proof that I have research skills and that I know how to be analytical and how I know how to write directions and things like that. So blogs can be very important to help prove a skill that you have. And then as far as the CFPs, as they're often called, call for papers, call for proposals, that would be in conjunction with a conference, for example. Now that's important because, again, that's a nice perk to have on your resume as of experience of having spoke at a conference. But I wouldn't do it at the detriment of your studies. I mean, if it's something that maybe stresses you out to speak in public, or if it's going to be a very time-consuming thing for you. And some of these conferences, I would say, fall right maybe when you have exams and things like that. So, I mean, I wouldn't do it at the expense of your studies. But, I mean, these summer conferences, like the ones in Las Vegas, I don't see any harm in that. They have plenty of tracks at B-Sides Las Vegas, for example, that are for first-time speakers. I believe it's called, is it Ground Truth? One of them, shoot, I'm forgetting the name, I apologize. One of the tracks is specifically designed for first-time speakers and you're assigned a mentor. So it's actually a great idea because it's something wonderful to have on a resume. It's very impressive, especially if you were accepted to something like B-Sides Las Vegas, which is very competitive. So I hope that it helps to answer that person's question. I mean, they're definitely beneficial, but just not at the expense of your personal life, your student life, or your professional life if you're also juggling, since you're mostly, I'd say, world campus students, I imagine that you're working full or part-time in addition to your studies. But if you can fit it in and it's something that you enjoy, then definitely go for it. But a blog would probably be more easy to maintain and probably a lot less stressful. But yeah, it's a good way to highlight your skills.
Okay, I think this next one goes kind of hand in hand with that. What are some good ways as a student to begin to cement yourself in the InfoSec community?
Definitely. Well, get involved. I can't stress that enough. Get involved. And what does that look like? So it looks like different things. It could look like volunteering at a conference. And for some conferences, that's how you get into the conference. Besides Las Vegas, for example, I just saw a tweet the other day that their volunteer list is still open. If you volunteer a certain number of hours, you get a pass to Besides Las Vegas, which is, I believe, is now sold out. So on the one hand, volunteering for any conference is a way to get in and get involved. You'll meet people. A lot of times you'll get to sit in sessions. You might be a helper or a timekeeper, and you still get to sit through these sessions and learn while volunteering. Another way is, social media. InfoSec Twitter is very active, and it's a great community. You'll learn a lot. If you're not a Twitter person or not a social media person, I mean, it really is to your advantage, though, at least just to be a lurker. There's so many tools out there that at least can, you can set up feeds, and you can maybe just pay attention to certain hashtags and kind of see the information as it goes by. And then if you want to participate, you can just jump in to some of these conversations, and you'll get to meet people that way. And then eventually you meet them in person at conferences. And then just even going to conferences, if you're fortunate enough to be able to afford to go to a conference. A lot of conferences will have student pricing, or they don't necessarily like to call them scholarships, but travel grants or things like that. Just physically being there, going to a conference is great. And here's a little tip. Some of these big conferences will have a separate entry ticket just for what's called the exhibit hall or the vendor hall, whatever they call it, marketplace sometimes, things like that. I know it might seem silly, but let me explain to you. Going to a conference and just to the exhibit hall is very valuable, because who's there? All the different vendors in this industry are there. So you can go to each booth and understand what these tools are. Who are the big players in the industry? Well, who has the biggest booths? That's one way to see who a big player is. But even go to the small booths, just find out what these people do and just be honest. Say, hi, I'm a student. I'd like to go into security. I'm new to all this. Tell me, what does your product do? Tell me about it. Just be honest. I know a lot of people are reluctant to speak to sales or marketing people because they feel like they'll be pressured to buy something. But just be honest. State who you are. I'm a student. I'm learning. Please just, tell me about your product. I've done that so many times. And just, I'm not afraid to admit that I don't know who a company is. A couple of years ago, I went to some very famous companies that went to their booths and just freely admitted I didn't know who they were. And I'm not going to name any of them now, but I tell the stories now and people just laugh and say, how did you not know? This was not one of them, but I'll give you an example. It was as if I went up to the Apple booth and said, hey, who are you? Well, I went to, security vendors who have that sort of name recognition within security and asked them those questions. And I wasn't treated poorly. People were happy to help and welcomed me in the community. So don't be scared to do that. And then, just go to meetups. Meetup.com is a great place just to search for different keywords. You could search by language because there's Python meetups. There's regular InfoSec meetups. They might call them cybersecurity meetups. On Twitter, again, you'll find meetups. Just going to places. Sometimes they're held in bars. I went to one on Sunday that I actually organized. It was called the New Jersey Hackers Diner Meetup. We literally met in a diner. And I think there was maybe about 12 of us, I think. And we just had brunch and we talked. And that was it. Everybody paid their own way. It was, no stress. Some people drank, some people didn't. Everybody ordered whatever they wanted. And we just had fun conversations about security-related topics. And you just meet these people, and that's how you get involved, because you'll get invited to things. Just put yourself out there. Now, I realize that for some people, this might be harder, than others. Well, then find reasonable alternatives. Look for online events, things like this, something that you can join and you could still be social by typing a question in or asking a question. Figure out what works best for you, but you really just need to put yourself out there and meet people because that's how you're going to learn.
And you were talking about the scholarships for the conferences. I've seen so many going up on Twitter just in the past 2 weeks. It's incredible. Just people getting their way paid.
Oh, I'm not sure if it's fully paid. I mean, I think it's partial for a lot of them. So yeah, it's been great. There's been passes available, and a portion of travel. I guess depending on how far away you are. But I mean, honestly, I wouldn't rely on that because there was, the number of travel grants given away really is just a fraction of the people who attend the Las Vegas conferences. So, be resourceful, be creative. I paid my own way to Las Vegas the first time I went in 2016. I figured out a way to make it happen. I took Southwest, which is a cheaper airline. I brought some food with me so that I brought instant oatmeal. I brought one of those electric kettles so that I could make coffee and have oatmeal in my room in the morning. And I brought granola bars with me and things like that. I figured out ways to save money so that I could go and make that work. And I believe the first trip I went out there in 2016, I think I was there for 10 days because I didn't really understand the schedule of the conferences. So I was there for a little bit longer than I needed to. But you make it work. And yes, there are lots of travel grants out there and you really have to be vigilant for that. But don't rely on it. Like I said, they're very competitive and it's really just a fraction of how many people go out there. But also don't think that it's the Las Vegas conferences are the be all end all. There's a lot of information that is recorded or live streamed, and plus Twitter, you'll get a lot of updates from people. I was sort of complaining the other day that there was an argument on Twitter, some people saying, well, I hate that everybody's, making Las Vegas out to be this big event. It's like, well, but that's what happened. The community turned Las Vegas into this, must see, must experience event to go to. It's not for everyone. It is very large. It is a very large, crowded event, and it is fun and it is educational. But if you're someone who maybe struggles with crowds, that might not be your scene, and that's fine. There are so many small conferences all over the world, like Security B-Sides. You could go to, a 100 or 200 person or even less conference and still get good information. So don't think that not going to Las Vegas doesn't make you an InfoSec professional. Go if you want to go to experience it, but please don't feel like, you're not a real InfoSec person if you don't go. Look around you first, start local, see what's available locally, and then, figure out if it's something that you want to do. If you can afford it, it's not worth going into debt over. So see what makes sense for you.
Okay, now we're shifting into more interview type questions.
Okay.
When in an interview, what will make you stand out?
Well, confidence will make you stand out. I'll go back to networking for a second. Remember your networking, that will also help. If you go into an interview already having some familiarity with the people, that will help. Having accomplishments, and you might think, well, what sort of accomplishments could a student have? Go back again. Look, here's my blog. This is my home lab. Don't underestimate the value of a home lab. You can talk about, I have this spare laptop where I practice reverse engineering, or I've written a bunch of code. If you have a GitHub repository that you can maybe show them. Proof that you've done something, that's impressive, and that will set you apart. It's one thing to sit there and know the theory of things, but to be able to show something, to have something to show for it is impressive. And, you know, being able to think on your feet and anticipate things. I'll give an example of that. The interview I had for my current job occurred the same day as the WannaCry outbreak. Now, because of the time zone difference, it wasn't it wasn't a fully impacted here. Like I said, I'm outside of Philadelphia, so we didn't really know the full impact of it yet, considering the time of day I had my interview plus whatever, you know, was happening in the world with it. But I heard that on the news, and I thought to myself, you know, if I was an interviewer, I would bring this up. So on my drive actually, let me take this back. I didn't hear it on the news yet. It was the feeds that I have for InfoSec stories. Let me clarify that. It wasn't a big news story yet. It was just InfoSec news. So on my drive to the interview, I anticipated some questions about it. And I thought to myself, if I were an interviewer, I would ask someone for examples of how to remediate WannaCry. And so I went through some answers in my head. And sure enough, during my interview, it was, give me 3 ways, you know, you would remediate a situation like this WannaCry we're hearing about. And I was able to rattle them off because I anticipated that. And I feel like that was impressive because I was ready. I didn't sit hem and haw. I was ready for it. I anticipated it. So being pragmatic, thinking ahead, paying attention to what's going on in InfoSec news that day, because there might be something popping up. And, you know, it's also impressive to know that you're on top of what's going on. Do you want to switch over to some of these questions that are coming in live?
Written down, there aren't any. There's, Matt said, not doing willing crowds is 100% me. Cisco Live was overwhelming.
Oh, I just realized I can see the comments myself. So sorry. Okay, sorry, continue. I just thought I saw the number popping up and I thought they were all questions.
No.
Let me just address Matt's thing. Yeah, Matt, thank you for saying that. Yeah, I fully, I fully understand that. Yeah, the crowds aren't everyone's cup of tea, but I encourage you to still go to conferences. There's plenty of small conferences that you can go to that won't be as overwhelming as Cisco Live. If any of you find yourself in a position that maybe your job makes you go to one of these large conferences, I can offer a couple of tips and tricks of how to survive it. One of them is to the best of your ability, you know, given the schedule of the conference, you know, maybe time yourself. We have all kinds of gadgets these days. You can fake a phone call. I know there's apps that can call you, or you can just set a timer. You know, figure out what's your threshold of being around other people. Maybe it's like, okay, I can handle this for half an hour, but then I need to go take a break. So fine, set an alarm for 30 minutes and then go to the restroom, go outside, go find somewhere and compose yourself. You still have to go back. You know, remember, this may be a work event, but, you know, be very mindful of timing. Timing can help you by doing things in intervals. If you break a larger task down into little pieces, it's something that you can handle more often. That's probably the number one way that you can kind of handle that. But yeah, it can be very overwhelming. I really don't like to use the terms introvert, extrovert, ambivert, things like that. And that's a talk that I give another time, but just know what works for you. You know, I can handle half an hour of this. I can handle 2 hours of this. I'm not going to go out and party at night because I'd rather sit in my hotel room so that I can be, you know, my best for tomorrow. You know, don't let anyone ever, you know, shame or intimidate you into doing something you don't want to do, whether it's drinking or going out or just having some private time. You know, do what works for you because you want to be at your best for learning and meeting people. So figure out what that means to you and then just work accordingly.
That's really good advice for someone like me who struggles with anxiety around those sorts of things. I'm sure I'm not the only one.
Yeah.
Does anybody have any questions on anything so far before I keep going on the list here? Nope. Okay. What are some things that you feel are lacking in the InfoSec professional community?
Oh my, that feels like a loaded question. Well, I'd also want to be diplomatic. I don't want to burn any bridges. So I'll answer that question by starting with a shameless plug for myself, only because I'm not sure how to answer this question. I created a talk called Empathy as a Service to Create a Culture of Security. And I pull from my library science background and try to get more technical types to understand the concept of empathy. Empathy is not sympathy. I don't want you to feel sorry for the end users. I want you to know what it feels like to be in their shoes. Many of the tech-minded individuals in InfoSec have been dealing with computers for all their lives, and some of them, and they may not understand what it's like to be scared of technology or for it to be confusing. So I try to pull other examples to get people to remember what it was like to be new at something, and just to be patient and to listen. There's active listening. There's ways that you can listen for something that somebody is not saying, and then you can hone in on that and then ask more pointed questions. That I'm talking about if you're trying to say interview an end user about whether or not they clicked on a phishing email. They may be scared to answer because they might think that they might get fired. So you have to make sure that they're at ease. So I think that it's getting better, but I think there is a lack of empathy because there's a lot of people who complain all the time about stupid end users, and I get that you want to blow off steam. And yes, some people do click on things that are just defy explanation for us, but ultimately they're the reason why we have a job, and they're who we serve. InfoSec is a service industry. We don't make anything necessarily, especially not anything tangible. But I mean, for the most part, most InfoSec people are in a service position. Yes, there are InfoSec companies that make products and things like that. I mean more some of the practitioners, people working in SOCs and analysts and things like that. You're servicing somebody, a client or an end user within your company or things like that. And then other things, we need to make information security more diverse. Diversity inclusion is lacking, and it is getting better. I've already noticed in the few years that I've been in the industry, it does look different than it did a few years ago. But I want you to all also expand your definition of what diversity means. It's not just gender or any preference or race. It's liberal arts majors. It's accounting majors. It's people with no college degree, with to people with, like myself, too many college degrees. It's people from different industries, career changers. It's students, people like myself who had a whole career in another industry who made a change into it. It's diversity is very complex. And then there's inclusion, asking those people to speak at conferences, inviting people to your meetups. There's I did not coin this saying, but there's a saying that I've read is, diversity is throwing a party, but inclusion is inviting people to dance, is asking people to dance. So we need to be asking people to dance more, because I think we still need work on diversity and inclusion, but we need to start pushing more for asking people to dance. We need to see more diverse backgrounds of speakers and writers and podcasters and things like that. So, that's a big deal in the tech world in general.
And since we are talking about diversity, how can everyone help fight the gender pay gap? How do you think?
Oh boy,
It's a big one.
Well, transparency is helpful. I know this probably isn't the best industry to base this on, but I know in Hollywood, for example, some male actors have been more transparent about what they're making, especially if they have a female co-star, things like that. Just for women specifically, being more bold about knowing your worth and asking for more and not being intimidated by someone trying to lower your asking rate. It's doing research, trying to piece together. The Bureau of Labor Statistics is one place that does it. Just try to figure out what the range is for that position. That is a much more, that's a bigger issue that I really don't know the answer to. But I would say just, I think it affects, women and people of color the most. It's knowing your value and being bold and being brave. And it's, it does take courage to stand your ground and say, no, I'm worth this much, knowing that it could result in, the withdrawal of an offer, some cases. There's all kinds of books you can read about salary negotiation tactics and things like that. But, be realistic, try to do some research and figure out, what really is worth, that type of position. Glassdoor is a resource. It's, GLASSDOOR.com. It's kind of like Yelp for employers, sort of. People will post reviews of employers there. It's usually disgruntled employees, I would say, but take a look and see, are they saying that they're paying too low, or do people feel happy? Oh, thank you, Matt. Yes, glassdoor.com. Are people happy with their salaries? I wish I had some magic wand that I could make it better. But just know that, women and people of color have a harder time with this. Typically there's an expression of you have to be, twice as good to be considered half as smart, or something like that. It's a struggle. So, we need allies from people who are already established to, hiring managers have the power to, make things more equal. So I hope that helps to answer the question.
That was a hard one. I think you did okay.
Yeah, I think Adam, work choice is hard for half but there's different ways to say it, but that's what Adam wrote is basically what I was getting at. I've heard it a couple different ways, but it's the same, in the end, it's the same thing. No, let's just try to be confident, but you need to do research. You can't just pull a number out of thin air and say, I'm worth this. You need to back it up. And if you do get that salary that you ask for, you have to deliver too. So, but I would say that research is going to be your key, is to figure out. And it's, it's also difficult, in the US, because we have always been conditioned not to talk about salaries. And sometimes you can't. Sometimes you sign things that you can't, you can't do that. But it's definitely going to come from the companies themselves and hiring managers and human resources and things like that. But as an individual, just do your research, do your homework, be strong, but also keep in mind there's some key phrases you can use of, like, if someone asks you what salary do you want, you can say, well, I'd like to get an understanding of the total compensation package, because remember, benefits, maybe tuition reimbursement, 401k, days off, things like that. Maybe it's not the base salary that you wanted, but maybe that there's bonuses, and maybe there's a really good 401k that has a match and things like that. Maybe you really need to look at the whole picture, because if the salary is really good, but the health benefits are then any extra money you're just going to be spending on health benefits. So, you need to remember, to look at the whole package, because you want to consider what your actual take-home pay is going to be in relation to all the other benefits and things they offer. Does that make sense?
Yes, Matt says about the pay gap, I've seen some creative HR practices like stripping identifying info out from resumes except numbers, and hiring managers tell HR which number resume they want to interview and what the resume's starting salary should be.
Yeah, I can't speak to that. That definitely doesn't sound like something I would know as someone applying for things. But yeah, I mean, the HR industry as a whole definitely needs to reinvent the hiring practice to make things more equal.
Do you think it is better to pick an InfoSec subcategory and stick to it, or move around in the field and become more well-rounded, like red team or policy?
Sure. I'm not sure, because I would say there's pros and cons to each. On the one hand, if you become very skilled in, say, red teaming, then you can then again maybe ask for a higher salary and be seen more as an expert, especially if you're publishing and speaking about that. And I hate using the word agile, because to me it always means, I think of like DevOps, and that usually means insecure, because I usually don't care about security at times. But you need to be agile at the same time if you're job hunting. Ultimately, I would say it depends on where your passions lie. I mean, if you really only want to do red teaming, I wouldn't force yourself to be a generalist, because you want to be happy, right? So, I mean, it also depends on where you live too. What sort of jobs are available? Are you willing to relocate? And it depends on the job market. If you're in an area where security jobs are kind of scarce, it might be to your benefit to be more of a generalist, so that you can kind of fit in anywhere. But if you're fortunate enough to live in an area that has a booming tech and security industry, then you can write your own ticket a little bit more with a specialty. So there's a lot of other factors involved. I would say your skills and your passion are probably going to dictate that the most. But then also, what's realistic for you to get a job in that. And there's no harm. I know someone who was a red teamer who decided he wanted to switch and go blue team. So he did. So, and there's nothing to say that you can't switch at some point. It might be a little bit more difficult to go from, say, reverse engineering to, compliance and policy, just because they're so very different. But again, if you want to, go for it. But yeah, just kind of keep in mind about your job prospects too, because ultimately that's your goal, right? Is to get a job in it. So don't do anything that's going to be so limiting that you can't get a job.
Do you have any suggestions on places to expand your skills and make yourself more marketable? I guess programs or sites?
Well, certifications seem to be like gold in information security. I haven't heard of anyone consider a master's of cybersecurity to be on par with a certificate. The certificates really seem to drive things, and by that I mean those CompTIA, Security Plus, Network Plus, things like that. Then you have all those SANS Institute certificates, like I have a GSEC, for example. There's all these different certificates. The SANS certificates are a great financial investment, but they are very highly regarded. So again, that's up to you, what you want. You may see these in job listings, GSEC, GCIH, or I can't remember all the different names. So certifications are definitely things that you have to figure out if it's, I'm sorry, can you repeat the question again? I feel like I got down a hole of alphabet soup letters there. Can you repeat the question?
I guess just basically, do you have any resources that you like to use to learn more skills?
Oh, okay. So, all right. I think you read that differently the second.
I did. I was reading it. I reworded it this.
Okay, I was gonna say, because this doesn't sound like the same thing I was answering. So yeah, so I have a GSEC certification through SANS. I didn't complete it, but I did take the Network Plus training. I mean, the certifications are what is going to, to be impressive and kind of get you through for interviews. I just make a quick side note. You'll see the CISSP listed a lot on, it's usually called a CISP, is usually how people abbreviate it. You'll see the CISSP certification listed so many times on InfoSec jobs. Unfortunately, they list it when it's not really plausible. It'll be an entry-level position, and then they'll list, CISP certification. Off the top of my head, I believe you have to have at least 5 to 7 years of real security work experience before you can have a full CISSP certification. I'm putting an asterisk there. I can't remember the exact number. It's something like 5 to 7 years. You can still take the exam and have what's called a provisional CISSP certification. But somewhere along the line, somebody in the HR world decided that the CISSP certification was going to be the standard for every security job. But that's silly if it's an entry-level position, because you wouldn't have the years of experience to go behind it. So just take it with a grain of salt. Sometimes it's just thrown in there. And to me, that just means, well, they didn't really write this job description well. And sorry, I'm going to make another quick detour. There's a very famous article from the Harvard Business Journal that was based on a study that women don't typically apply for a job unless they meet at least 70% of the requirements listed, whereas the overwhelming majority of men will just apply for a job, if they maybe meet one of the requirements listed. Again, those numbers may be off because I'm maybe misremembering the article, but you get the gist of it. Is there's a big divide there. So, don't be afraid to apply for a job if you don't meet all the requirements, unless it absolutely says something is mandatory. For the most part, job descriptions are like wish lists. So you don't know what applications they're receiving. I actually had this the other day. There was a job that I didn't think I was qualified for, but the company kept encouraging me to apply for it, because they finally just came clean and said, we haven't found anyone that meets these requirements, but we think you'd really be good at this, and we're willing to work with you on this. So it gave me, so I said, okay, fine, I'll take another look at it. So you don't know what they're seeing. They may be willing to make accommodations to help bring you up to speed for something. So don't be afraid, to apply for something if you're not meeting it 100%. So going back to the tools, there's so many out there. You have a lot of access already as students to things, but there's Cybrary, there's, oh my goodness, I'm drawing a blank. There's all kinds of other online free or minimal cost classes where you can get some specific skills. So those are always good. Just, reading, keeping on top of things. There's a lot of free resources that you can just, not only keep up with skills, but just keep up with news. These all tie together. These are like hard skills and soft skills, and just knowing what's going on. You should always know what the latest malware going around is, and you should know what the latest acronyms are. I just learned, was it 2 weeks ago, I think, IIoT, Industrial Internet of Things. I didn't realize until I read an article about railroad cybersecurity that the industrial industries have their own acronym for Internet of Things, and they call it IIoT. Now I know that. So reading is fundamental. Reading is going to help keep you in the loop and knowing what you need to know.
John says, are certifications something that should be used in addition to a degree, or are they worth more than a degree?
Well, since I have 3 degrees, I'm biased and going to say you should get certifications in addition to a degree. Someone without a degree would say the opposite of that. I mean, are you planning on like ditching school now and just getting certifications? If I were a hiring manager, I think it would just show someone who's well-rounded, who has both. But there's plenty of people in the InfoSec industry who don't have college degrees. Some of them may even have, just have GEDs, not high school diplomas, and they may have certs and they may not have certs. I think that in 2019, I seem to think that it's probably more expected that or desired that people have college. I can't really answer that since I'm not a hiring manager. But I say there's no harm in having certifications. The certifications are, the degree is more broad. The certification is a more specific proof of a skill. Does that help? I'm not sure if they're on the call or not. I think both together are fine, but just keep in mind the certification is, and a certification doesn't mean that you can do a job. It's proving that you passed a test, right? So it's highlighting one specific skill set. Ultimately, you need to have all the knowledge that you're learning in order to do a job. A cert just might get you past, the first round of a screener.
Sean asks, for someone coming into the field later in life, how receptive are employers to these people? And is there an unwritten age limit in entering the field?
Yeah, I see your question there, Sean. Yeah, well, I kind of fall into that category. This is the thing. I came into InfoSec confident about the transferable skills I brought with me from library world. And that's something that from whatever industry you're coming from, you need to be able to succinctly and confidently explain that you bring in experience from another industry and how it applies to information security, because it's, that has its own value. I can't say that I've ever experienced any age discrimination. And as far as US law goes, I believe if you're 40 or over is when age discrimination applies. Just FYI for anyone who's in that age range to be concerned. I think it might just be something more of a culture fit. Something you might want to be mindful of. With would you feel comfortable working with a bunch of people right out of college? That would be a personal, your personal preference. But I haven't experienced any employers say, anything negative or things like that, because I don't know, I've just been very confident about all these skills and experience that I bring in with me. Because I've heard it said many times that information security isn't necessarily an entry-level industry. You do need to have, some sort of base knowledge. So I think in that respect, having some sort of work experience from something else that does have skills with it, is a positive. And since Sean is on the call, I'm going to ask if that helps. Oh, there he is. Okay. So yeah, and just to kind of answer your question more, I would say the only concern, quote unquote, is just figure out, maybe a brand new startup isn't going to be your vibe. Just figure out what works for you. Maybe you're not the work from home type. Maybe you're a Gen Xer and that's not really something that you're comfortable with. I would just figure out what your own personal preference is, but legally they can't discriminate against you. There are things you can do with your resume to maybe, make years not so obvious for, say, college graduation or things like that, you're not lying. You just might have it, not as obvious for things. I don't know. Does that help? Since you're in the chat room here, is this helping? How about while he types that in, do we have any other questions, Ray?
Yeah. What do you have any great stories from the field that you want to share?
Oh boy, I have to figure out what I could share. Well, okay. Well, so while I'm thinking in the back of my brain, I'll tell one story. It's just something cute and funny, and I've tweeted this before, but again, I work in the SOC and we handle a lot of the phishing emails. One day we received an email from an end user, and she clearly wasn't sure how to address it. So she wrote, "Dear Fish People," PHIS, "Dear Fish People." And I don't know, that just made me laugh a lot. And I thought that was funny. "Dear Fish People." And I was having a rough time a couple of weeks ago. And I know I was just kind of zoning out, trying to think of, a way to cheer myself up. And I remembered that the woman sent the email and called us fish people. And that made me laugh, and that made me happy. I mean, I was blue team in the SOC, so I don't have any crazy, I don't have any Jason Street level stories. If you follow Jason Street on Twitter, he has all kinds of crazy stories about accidentally robbing banks and things like that. I am afraid I do not have any fun stories like that. I can tell you about the time it was late on a Friday, and one of our alerts went off, and I saw that it was someone from another country in another time zone where it would have been very late at night, was doing something that it looked like it was malicious. Spoiler alert, it was not, but at the time I did not know. And of course it was 5:30 on a Friday. So I wanted to go home, but I needed to remediate the situation. So I started sending some messages, via a messenger, an internal messenger. Oh, wait, sorry. Matt asked, I never walked out holding the domain control. No. And started sending messages, and the person's not replying. And I quickly realized they may not understand English because the place where they were, English was not the native language. So I quickly went to an online translator, typed in what I needed to ask, also added a sentence at the end that I was using an online translator, so please excuse any errors, which is lesson number one, that if you do need to do that, explain to the person that you're using an online translator, because otherwise you look crazy because the online translators are good, but they do make some mistakes. And you also don't want to be held liable if the online translator does something that's inappropriate and you wouldn't even realize it. So I always, made my first introduction and then added my little line of, "I am using blank translator. Please forgive any errors." So long story short, through this translate, and then then this person wrote me back in their native language. Then I'll quickly go, copy, pasting. What did they say? Go back. I was asked them to stop what they were doing. I walked them through engaging the antivirus software. So like I said before, spoiler alert, it was not malicious, but it was, a false positive. It was looking like it was malicious. But I had to do something, right? I couldn't just walk out at 5:30 on a Friday and be like, oh, well, let's hope for the best. And, I didn't give up. And I had the analytical skills to realize, well, they're not ignoring me because, they're mean. They might be ignoring me because they don't know what I'm saying. And sure, you could argue, well, the person could have done a translator on their end, but remember, we're a service industry. That was my responsibility to make myself understood to them, not the other way around. So that's why I quickly realized, oh, okay, let me translate this. Let's do that. And in the end, the person was very apologetic and was very, cooperative. and followed all my instructions. I walked them through engaging the antivirus and then handed it off, to the whomever was on call and explained my situation. Then I found out later that, okay, it was a false positive and things like that. So, that's kind of crazy, right? A crazy thing. Yeah, but when you network and meet people, you get to hear some just amazing stories. Like I said, Jason Street and so many other people. So yeah, red teamers tend to have better stories. I'll admit that. Blue teamers have some good stories, but yeah, red teamers have some real crazy, crazy stories. If you have a chance to watch from the Layer 8 conference, if you go into YouTube, they have a channel, Layer 8, Layer, the number 8. The one by TinkerSec is just a fascinating story. Oh, and we're getting close to 9 o'clock here, so.
I just posted that one to our club.
Okay. Yeah. So, any last questions, or should I just talk for a few minutes? Okay. Okay, so I'll just kind of keep talking till 9 o'clock, but if anybody has any last second questions, you're doing good work here, getting involved, in tech, and there's an expression, I'm going to butcher the quote, but by Wayne Gretzky of, you want to skate to where the puck's going to be. So if you're students now, it really would behoove you to do some reading into tech, into security, figure out what's next, what's being developed now. If you can get in on, the early stages of the next technology or the next programming language or, the next IoT issues, that's really going to make you valuable, and that's going to make you stand out, and that'll make you ahead of the curve. And, I say this from experience because a couple of years ago, I had someone say to me, IoT, you should really pay attention to IoT. And, I've done that. I've been following what's going on. There's legislation now. And I said this years ago on a podcast. Well, years, it was probably 3 years ago, 4 years ago. But I said this on a podcast 3 or 4 years ago that, the only way we're going to see safer IoT devices is either through legislation, which is very slow moving, or through litigation, through the courts. And sure enough, if you check a lot of the congressional records and things like that, there's a lot more, bills and legal legislation that's being brought about to regulate cybersecurity and IoT specifically. California has an IoT law now. So because someone told me a couple of years ago to keep an eye on IoT, and I did that, I'm now seeing things come through that I firmly stated a couple of years ago, and that's pretty cool. It's pretty cool. So what I advise for you as students is, look around, set up, Google alerts, go to, figure out what sites you want to, to follow, and just try to figure out what the next big thing is, or not even big thing, but just figure out what's coming in tech and security, and really kind of dig in and get to know it, because before long, it'll bloom, and then you'll be the one with all the knowledge about it. So thank you, everyone. Fight on, state. I wish you all good luck in your future careers, and thanks so much for listening to me talk.
Thank you very much for talking to us. And I do want to say that you can find Tracy at InfoSec Sherpa on Twitter. I didn't say that in the beginning. But thank you.
Yep, I just put that in there. Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Matt. Yes, my own job search is going well. I have been just delightfully inundated with all kinds of messages. I'm doing my best to sift through them all, and it's been really amazing. The InfoSec community, can be amazing when it comes to helping people, and I encourage you all to get involved and get to know them all. So thanks so much. I really hope this was helpful.
Thank you. It was. Thanks everybody for coming.
Bye.